A very warm welcome to one and all present here today for this eighth workshop of Thrive, a Grad Partners initiative. My name is Akhilesh. I'll be your host throughout this journey. And first, I'd like to thank you all for your support that you have provided throughout these 2 months. Without this, I don't feel that this initiative would have been possible. I expect that you guys continue your support and push us to give you more such content on case competitions, how to approach them, and how to make your MBA journey more fulfilling. Today, we have with us national winners of TVS Epic Season 5 from the Institute of XLRI Jamshedpur, Miss Anuja and Mr. Atharva. Now, I'd like to hand over the stage to them and start the discussion forward.
Thanks for the introduction, Akhilesh. Hi everyone. We are from XLRI Jamshedpur, and this was our first case comp win. And we're really excited about talking about this with you guys, and hopefully we can be of some help. So we'll start with what the problem statement was. So this is a direct snapshot from the problem statement that was given to us. Essentially, they wanted to integrate generative AI across TVS credit, right? That was the problem statement, if I am to put it succinctly. They wanted us to cover a lot of things within that. First was, of course, benchmarking, what others are doing, right, to adopt Gen AI. Then the second part was to examine the relevant technologies, what actually can be done with generative AI, and have a strategic approach to this. The third thing was they had outlined a lot of departments or areas which could use generative AI, like you can see in the third point, and they wanted us to pick any four use cases and deep dive into it as to how we are suggesting them to integrate Gen AI. And fourth and fifth is essentially a communication strategy and a cost benefit analysis for the entire thing. So this was basically the problem statement. One caveat here I would like to add is while these five things they had given to us in the beginning of the competition, we were expected to encapsulate this in our two-page submission for the first submission that we made after the quiz round happened for us. So over there, we included all of these things, as you will see in the coming slides. Uh, yes. So this is our first submission, the first page. Here, as you can see, the top part is talking about the benchmarking, which is what the problem statement requested. At the bottom, we mapped out the value chain of a customer from awareness to loan repayment, right? And on the left side, there's a retail customer. On the right side, there's a business customer. And we just try to explore at each stage how can generative AI make a difference, right? So that we're as thorough as possible and we're not just listing down things. So if you are to take learnings from this, I think the first thing would be whenever any case comp is asking you for a one pager or two pager, right, in the initial rounds, and they have not mentioned the word slides, you should ideally create a document kind of thing and not a slide because it helps you encapsulate more information. Uh, but that does not mean, you go on Microsoft Word and just type out some stuff. This we had created using PPT. It took us a couple of attempts to actually even learn about this, that this is how you're supposed to do it and this is how they expect. So that is why I'm telling you that it is supposed to be structured like a PPT, but it can be a document. This is the second page of our solution. Athar, why don't you talk about it?
Yeah, thanks, Anuja. So, while I won't go into the details of what is there on the screen, it is generally a good idea, at least in an executive summary type of submission, to encapsulate your ideas in form of like an already existing framework or you yourself come up with a framework, so that it is just easy for the judges to understand what exactly you're trying to say. So in this particular case, we have used the house framework, which you will be able to see at the top. And coming to the bottom part of the slide, you will see that we have created some sort of a GTM strategy, which isn't exactly a framework, but it basically tries to include all the stakeholders which the company would be dealing with. So, in a way, it is also a good representation of how we are approaching the problem. And of course, the financial impact, with the main takeaways being the break even as well as the NPV. So that is also a highlight, and hence that is also something which we included in this slide. So basically, a succinct generalization of our entire solution, so that they get an idea of what we are exactly trying to say.
Atharva, a quick question over here. You said that we can use existing frameworks at the same point of time. Maybe we can also create our own frameworks. So, do you have anything in mind with respect to on what basis you are going to select those parameters for the framework?
So it is quite relative based on the problem statement. So for example, in this case, we had to select four use cases, and hence we tried to find a common sort of a link between all of those four use cases. And then that is why we decided to go with the house framework, because it is a part of a whole solution. But let's take a case where each and every uh, use case that we have taken is completely independent, then this thing doesn't make sense. So in that case, you come up with a framework which, so let's say awareness, consideration, and purchase. So these three things can be common to the four things which you will be choosing to look into. So that is something which you can do. So basically, something which connects the entire solution in a way. Anuja, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think just like you said, right? We always, I think anyone doing a case comp has a lot of content, right? We would research a lot, we would think about it a lot. And honestly, I think everyone has great content. But what helps you move forward, in my experience, is structure, right? The judge should be able to see how you were thinking about it. You have to represent that, as well as you have to show that you have thought about the problem statement from a very holistic lens. Like, for example, Adhar was talking about awareness consideration. So, at the bottom half of the slide, this is the entire customer journey, what we call being MECE, right? Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So, this shows that each stage pay, whatever we could think about, we've thought about. And then, if we get selected in the further rounds, we will elaborate on any four use cases like they had asked us to do. So I think just be structured. A framework sounds like a very intimidating word, but by creating frameworks, we just mean that showing anything in a very systematic way. Even if you see the benchmarking on the top half of the slide, you could just put, let's say, five companies and write what they are doing, right? But we try to structure it in terms of the departments. That, okay, marketing department, growth department, customer service, right? So that the judges can see that we have done the benchmarking from the front office to the back office, so that it's more holistic.
So I think
I hope that answers the
reimagining,
question.
yeah, yeah. So I think reimagining it in a different way would be uh, to show judges what your whole thought process is, because maybe almost everyone would have a final solution that they will be proposing, but very few individuals or very few teams would actually put in that much effort to showcase what all elements they have thought of. And when you have thought of all the elements which would be relevant to a solution, then it is always better to put those things forward in a easily readable manner, because again the judges won't have 2 days to go through a presentation and understand things. So those things should be understood by them in the 10 or 15 minutes of the presentation. And I think that is where your frameworks would come into the picture, and they'll kind of give you that upper hand over and above the other competitors. So I think kudos on that. You have really structured your PPT. I can see how you have broken down each and every department or each and every chunk of data, and it is very crystal clear. We can read it. Second thing, you guys have not gone into that traditional route of making it a presentation, but you have used a document. So I think that is a very good trick. Very few people use it. So viewers, if you find it useful, do use it. And a huge shout out to that team for that. They have found a loophole into the expectations of the companies, and if you are able to see through these let's say mistakes or these vacuums that are being presented to you, then it will help you in the long run. Please guys, take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Akhilesh. So essentially, this was our first submission. Now, from here on, we go to the final round submission, right? Here, there were basically three rounds, if I recall correctly. First, we had a quiz. Then we moved on to the two-pager that we were talking about. And then we had the grand finale, wherein we had to present our solution in around
Anuja, I think we are having some connectivity issue from your end, so if you could just pause for a minute and maybe continue now.
yes, I'm audible now, right?
Yeah, you're audible now. You can start.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No issues, no issues.
Cool, cool. Yeah, so basically, we were given around 8 minutes to present our final PPT to the judges. The round was virtual over Zoom, and they had already communicated that they will be very strict about the 8 minutes, right? Or there will be no allowances given in that regard. And then there would be 5 to 7 minutes for Q&A. So it was a total 15-minute thing. So there was no specific slide number given to us that you have to make 5 slides, 10 slides. But given we had 8 minutes, we made enough number of slides such that we can talk about each slide in sufficient detail, right? So this was our first slide. Here also again the same thing that we mentioned earlier, that the final PPT was supposed to be about the use cases, right? Deep diving into the 4 use cases that you're selecting. But before directly starting with the use case, this is like an overview slide, right? That is again uh, tracing out the same customer journey as from our first submission, and sort of giving more nuance to it, that if if you are to have a traditional journey, then the top row is how you would go about it. But we want a Gen AI journey. That will be the second part of it. And after this, we have evaluated each of the things we mentioned by feasibility and impact to finally arrive at where you see the tick mark, right? That this is what we'll be selecting and deep diving on. So again, the learning here is it's very tempting to find 3, 4 use cases and just start, right? And you might have detailed them a lot, but I think this really helps the judges see that there is some logic, some method you used to actually decide on why these 3 use cases, and not just that, this is the topic I found the most information on, so I'll be going ahead with this. So this serves as an intro as well as provides a rationale for the entire PPT you will see coming forward. So now we'll deep dive into the use cases that we tick marked in the first thing. So this is basically Gen AI driven hyper personalization. Here also I would talk about the structure of the slide. Uh, Given that we only had one slide, right? We talked about the problem at the top, right? Very basically calling out why we need this. Then we did some benchmarking. So to call out here, if you see in the first solution, we had done just one benchmarking because of the uh, constraint of space, right? But here, when we are making individual slides, wherever relevant, we have tried to do benchmarking for that particular solution that we're proposing. So here in the benchmarking, we've covered some forms and also then again called out the impact. Which ones are the high impact things that we can take inspiration from? After benchmarking, we've gone ahead and formulated a strategy for TVS. And on the right hand side, we have shown customers a new journey, right? Let's say if a customer, after we've implemented hyper personalization, is trying to take a loan offering from TVS, what would it look like? So this helps judges clearly see and for you to clearly communicate your thinking, right? What are you actually saying? What will actually change after you've implemented the things on the left? So this is why we thought the structure made sense. Here we have called out the implementation. Why we did this is because if you see hyper personalization is a very new thing, right? Gen AI driven hyper personalization at least. So it's very easy to say that we will collect so much data, we will use generative AI, and instead of segmentation, which is what we traditionally do, we will personalize to each individual. So we don't have to actually do this, right? We just have to write this on this slide. So it's very easy. But calling out an implementation plan is what keeps your solution rooted in reality and calls out, that A, you have thought about how to implement, because most organizations do have to think about implementation at some point, right? And second is it shows your research, your ability to, think about it from an on ground perspective. That, okay, we have decided to do this. How will we do this? So, this is what that slide talks about. Doesn't have to be really detailed because we don't know what TVS currently has. We don't know how they do things. But a general approach you can provide, which will set your solution apart from the solution. And at the bottom, we have called out impact. So this is also something important, right? You gave your solution, but what will this do? Why? Of course, we called out why we need it. It's to solve a problem. But even after implementing it, will there be any specific business value that is created for TVS? Otherwise, why would anyone invest so much and do so much implementation, right? So that is what we call out at the bottom. Another thing I want to mention is always, always, always write your sources. It's a very small thing, but none of us are, geniuses that we come up with stuff on our own, right? We'll always research, and of course, you have to. That is what is expected. You research the internet, you talk to people, and you sort of condense, synthesize a lot of information, use your own experience, and then put out something on the slide. So, for example, here the framework on the left hand side is from, I think, a white paper by BCG, if I'm not wrong. So we've clearly called that out at the bottom. So never ever plagiarize anything. It's okay to take frameworks from leading reports, of course, but always clearly call that out as a source.
Guys, just a quick question. I wanted to understand whether this deck structure was given to you already. So, for example, in the heading and in the bottom, there are specific colors used, green and blue to be precise. So, was this deck provided to you beforehand, or you have made it?
The blank template was given with their branding and the color
Okay.
scheme. Uh, yeah.
Okay, because everything is coordinated in a way, and I think that is also very relevant because I saw the first couple of slides as well, and they were matching, right? So for viewers, it is very important to have this understanding as well, because then these things would match with the company template, and the viewers or the reviewers, yeah, during your finale or semi-finale will feel that okay, these guys have actually done their research or they understand how our company works. So that familiarity in the whole process is also important for you guys as well as for them. And if that familiarity is there, they will also be less critical of you with respect to few aspects of your presentation, right? So some mistakes maybe they'll let go. So these are few tricks or tips that you can use during your presentations as well. I think Atharva, you are going to speak something.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I am done.
Right.
Good.
So, yeah. So, another one of our use cases was basically improving their credit risk assessment system. So, this particular use case was very critical for us as well as the company because the default rate in most of the leading NBFCs in India is very large, and hence they have a huge tendency to have bad loans in their company. So, this was one thing which we had decided consciously to focus more on, and hence a lot of the subsequent slides in our deck are also based on this thing. So here also, firstly, we started with benchmarking against like leading NBFCs and financing companies in India, which were direct or in some way indirect competitors of TVS Credit. So we did a benchmarking for those companies, and based on the things which were which were working for these companies, we decided that these five things TVS Credit can do. And amongst these five things, these two things, so the ones which are in blue on the right side, they are new to the company as well as new to the industry. So that is something which will be an USP for TVS Credit going forward. So that is something which we highlighted in the upper part of the slide. And then coming towards the bottom part of the slide, this is basically a high level strategy of how they can actually bring about those changes, the new integrations in the company, and that is what we try to summarize in this slide. Go ahead, Anuja. Now, this is building up on the two avenues which we identified for the company. So, here also, we decided to go ahead with assessing the feasibility as well as the potential impact that it might have on the company. And while it is obviously not 100% accurate because we don't have an insider knowledge of how things work in the company as well as how things work in the industry, but based on a lot of research which we did, this is quite close to what the reality would be on the ground, and hence it is a good thing to include in your PPTs because even in general, the judges don't just want to see a strategy, they want your solutions to be implementable and at the same time impactful for the company. Otherwise, it won't make sense for them. So, that is something which you need to call out in each and every slide if it is possible in your PPT, and that is what we tried to do here. And obviously, as I mentioned, this was a pretty big use case for us. We also decided to do a separate cost benefit analysis for this particular thing, and that is also included in the slide. Now this is now in the first slide we saw the strategy which we had made for the company. Now we come to the implementation part. So we divided the fraud detection journey into three separate columns. So the first one was analyzing the fraud patterns, then detecting the fraud patterns, and then mitigating the fraud patterns. And based on a few research papers that we read, we decided to shortlist a few algorithms, a few clustering analysis methods, as well as a few schematics and algorithms. And then we decided to make this type of a journey for the company, wherein they would be able to implement this in a phase wise step into their own system so that the likelihood of anyone being fraudulent would reduce for the company. So, this is basically a deep dive into the previous slide. Go ahead, Anuja. Now, coming to another use case, which was customer service. This is also an important use case for us because most of the loans which happen through TVS Credit are usually from people visiting their local branches. And as there is a lot of customer support, which
I
uh,
think Anuja is having some connectivity issues, so
yeah,
she'll be.
let her join back.
Okay. Okay. In the meanwhile, guys, those who are viewing and have any questions with respect to the presentation, they can actually drop in their questions in the comment section, and we'll try to take them one by one, ask the team, and get their insights on that. Welcome back, Anuja.
Hi guys, sorry about that. Akhilesh, are you able to see the PPT? Um,
Uh, Not
No,
yet.
it's not Anuja.
Loaded, I think.
Right. No,
This
no,
is where we were, right?
no. The customer service slide. Yeah, this one.
Okay. Sorry about
Right.
the connectivity issues, guys.
No worries.
Yes.
So another important use case for us basically was customer service, and hence we decided to first quantify the problem, which is at the top of the screen. Then we decided to have some sort of a strategy for the company, which is the solution matrix which you are seeing on the screen. And like Anuja mentioned earlier, this is actually something which we modified from what we found in the BCG report. So while it is not uh, completely verbatim as to what they had come up with in their report, it is quite similar and it is quite inspired by what the research the team there had done. So it is important that you call these things out because like these reports are quite public and you never know if a judge has read that report and then he realizes that you have plagiarized it. So it is always important and always a good practice to mention whatever reports and white papers you are using as a reference to make your slides. So that is also something which we did in this slide, and it is basically again dividing the matrix into four different parts, which is preemptive, self healing, self service, and support response, and then coming up with some common and some unique algorithms or some unique schematics so that uh, the customer experience insights uh, and other customer service related things can be achieved for the company. And after that we uh, try to quantify the expected impact which the company will see. So it can be anything ranging from NPS to improvement in their FTR rate. And since GenAI is quite synonymous with having a chatbot, that is also something which we tried to bring in here. And you can see that 280 seconds would be saved by using a GenAI chatbot. So that is also something which makes sense in this particular slide, and hence we included in that. And since GenAI is quite a nascent technology even now, it was necessary to come up with some sort of a long-term vision for the company, and that is also something which we decided to add to this slide, and also highlight the fact that TVS credit is at only the second rung of the ladder, and it still has to climb up three steps of the ladder, and hence it is important for them to start integrating Gen AI in their systems. Moving on, Anuja.
Yeah, just to add one thing here is like Athar mentioned, right, that we've also added that TVS is on the second rung of the ladder. So, if you want to take a learning from this, it should be that There are some things, of course, that you don't know. Like, for example, earlier we were talking about credit risk, personalization. This, as an outsider to the company, you can't really know what TVS is doing, where they are. But this particular thing, customer service, you can, right? So we just went on their website, we just used their chatbot as a potential customer. And that is how we got that sense that, okay, TVS is at this particular level. So whenever you're doing a case com, there will be some case coms, especially I think the FMCG ones, where you will be doing a lot of customer interviews and a lot of primary research because their TG is very similar to people around us. So in that case, you definitely should sort of have it as a state, and then how what you are doing is sort of elevating or making things better. That's a good thing to have in the solution. And move on to the next slide. Uh, so now that we've covered our four use cases, right? We again wanted an implementation model for the whole integrations, for the integrations as a whole. So let's say TVS currently has no GenAI capabilities, which is very likely since GenAI has only emerged recently. So we decided to have a detailed implementation plan as to what technologies, right? What algorithms, what models are readily available in the market can they take advantage of if they have to integrate GenAI in the manner that we just described. Um, and of course,
Right
no
now,
deck is complete without this, so Athar will talk about it.
yeah, coming to the last slide in our deck, which is basically a cost benefit analysis. But in our case, it isn't really a cost, just a cost benefit analysis. So when you're doing case comps, it is imperative that you stand out from your competitors, and especially when it is the finale round, you can be sure that each and every team is exceptionally prepared and each of them have their USPs. So you basically need something which makes you stand out from the crowd, and in our case this was one thing which helped us. So as you can see on the screen, we decided to choose two parameters which were valuable for the company in terms of the financial impact. The first one was default rate reduction due to the new credit risk management system which we had proposed. And another thing was the volume uplift which the company would see in terms of the loans which will be sanctioned because of hyper personalization as well as the improved customer service. So this is basically talking about an integration of all the three use cases which we decided to go ahead with, and basically doing a scenario analysis of the financial impact it would have for the company. So, in a traditional cost benefit analysis, which you can see on the right side of the screen, there is only one scenario, which is also there in the matrix. But in terms of visualizing the potential impact, it is very easy for the judges to understand that if like there is 20% loan reduction due to the CRM system and 8% increase in volume uplift, they will see a profit of 102 crores. So it is quite easy for them to map out the success which they will be having. And of course, they have in their mind some parameters about the success which they will be seeing in their company. So it is easy for them to understand this metrics as opposed to just having one single number. So this is something which stood out for us. And even during the Q&A, during our actual PPT, the judges were very curious about this scenario analysis which we did. So I think this was one of the things which set us apart. And of course, apart from this, the break even, ROI, NPV, all the general things which you will have in any cost benefit analysis, they are obviously there on the screen. So this is just a good value add for the entire deck.
Yes, I think that brings us to the end of our PPT.
Can we just go back to the last slide, slide number 9, if possible?
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, uh, just a quick bit of commentary on this. I think this scenario-based analysis is what I also used to put in specific case comps when I used to participate in 22 and 23. Uh, why I think this makes much more sense for the judges is because when they are actually evaluating a idea, or when they are actually proposing a business strategy within the company as well, they kind of make multiple scenarios. So 16 to 20 scenarios, they will also chart down and they'll see how many scenarios are actually going to give us a positive return. And in those kind of cases, this gives them a very clear visual representation of whether the idea is even going to make sense or not. And in that kind of a situation, even for them, when they are proposing something to the senior leadership, it kind of gives the senior leadership a confidence with respect to that particular idea, and henceforth it makes much more sense to put it in this format than to just give, let's say, a worst case scenario and best case scenario, wherein you are just having two numbers. So guys, if you're able to include this again, this would involve slightly more work, but at the same point of time, this also gives you a better understanding of your own idea. So on the basis of this, maybe I felt that okay, out of three proposed solutions, two are making sense for me. But after the financial evaluation, I realized that maybe one of them is not so good for the company, and I'll have to go back, rethink on my original proposed strategy, and then you can again make some changes with respect to your idea. So this is kind of validating yourself through the numbers as well, right? So really good, I think, interesting, because we hosted eight case comp winners till now, and you have been the one wherein you have emphasized on finances a lot, but at the same point of time made it more entertaining for the judges. So it is not just numbers; it is also making scenarios for them and making things simple for them. So kudos on that. I think since your presentation is now done, I'll quickly run through few questions, and I'll request both of you to kind of give your inputs on them. Correct. Uh, so there's a Pooja Chaudhary who is asking, how was the current journey collected? So, like you guys said, that you don't have inner understanding of how the company works. Still, you would have to give some basic structure, some basic framework with respect to that. So, what was your approach towards it?
Yeah. So if this is the journey being talked about, here that's why Pooja is very right. We didn't really know about the full journey of TVS credit. So that's why we have actually segregated it into traditional and the next frontier, right? And then the blue part is calling out the current journey. So here, like I mentioned, there are a lot of things that you can, pose as a customer on their website and find out. Like, for example, the first one is exploration and information gathering. This is just their marketing, right? When you are researching about loans or two-wheeler loans, do you get TVS credit ads on your Google search? Do you get those ads on social media? When you go on their website or for the first time, what is the kind of experience you're having? So this you can really, just find out yourself from their website and whether their targeted marketing is working or not. Uh, then the second thing is, of course, you go to the next step of, let's say you are trying to, uh, get a loan. You'll get all of this apply now on their website. You click on it. So that is how we have gotten this blue journey that you're seeing. Second thing is there's a reason we decided to go with this visual, right? Because we know that we can't be really specific because we don't know the processes like you're pointing out. So it's like a spectrum between traditional and the Gen AI. And it's just like, we're just showing which side of the spectrum TVS is leaning on. So we're not saying factually that आप यही कर रहे हो. That gives the judge an opportunity to call out because, of course, he knows more about TVS credit than I would as an external person, right? So, yeah, I think that's how we went about it. Athar, if you want to add anything.
No, no. And in terms of like, if this is also part of the question, the feasibility and impact, which we have written at the bottom. So basically, like Anuja said, we went to the website, we filled out their forms, and it was a tedious process. So it is quite logical that after having a Gen AI chatbot or an NLP based algorithm there, it will just reduce the burden on the customer to fill out all those forms and just reduce the time which they need to spend on the website. So here the impact would be significant for the customer, and the feasibility of implementation is also quite practical because it isn't really a lot of effort which the company needs to put in. So that is basically how the feasibility and impact has been assessed, and the opportunity is just like an amalgamation of these two parameters which we have used at the top.
Thank you, team. Second question by Aksh Gupta says, can you please tell me where we can learn how to make these types of PPTs? Like, is there any source that you've referred to, or uh, anything that maybe helped you in terms of figuring out how to approach?
I think Athar should take this because the first PPT we ever made and the last PPT we ever made, like Athar has, grown leaps and bounds in terms of slides. So I think he should take this.
So I wasn't really great at making slides. So I just used to have loads of text on the screen, and that would be my slide earlier. But after that, I went through a few of the during my first year of MBA. I went through a lot of case com decks, which my seniors had submitted, and like basically how to represent data, how to succinctly uh, put your idea forth without using whole paragraphs of text. That is something which I learned from seeing decks of other people. So I think that is a very good thing to consider. And like the and another thing which I think was also the case for Anuja. So during our internships, we had to make a lot of PPTs. So that is also, and they were quite in a particular format which we have continued to follow in our decks. So learning it on the job was also something which helped me. And just in terms of this particular PPT, I think this was somewhere around September. And before this, we had probably submitted around 5 to 6 decks already, and that didn't go anywhere. So I mean, it is a lot of effort, and you will probably participate in 20 case comps, win 3 of them. So that is how it is, but you just have to stick with it.
If you are lucky, you will win three.
True.
Yeah.
Anything from
Yeah,
your
it's
side, Anuja?
honestly,
Ah,
yeah,
please,
yeah.
please go ahead.
So that's what I want to say that it is a very iterative thing. Like I mentioned, right? The first text, so Atharva and I have done most of the case comps together. So the first deck we made, if I am to project that, like people in the chat will be like, "इससे अच्छा तो मैं बना सकता हूँ." So it's a journey, right? It's once you, I think, no matter how many decks you see, or no matter how many resources you refer to, of course it helps. But eventually, you have to make two, three bad presentations initially, not get selected, and then this is a good thing actually that you can do, which we did. I remember, submitted a deck for Perfetti, and we had put in a lot of efforts for Perfetti Confi challenge, right? And it did not work out. We couldn't even clear the first round. So we were very heartbroken because it was our very first case com for which we put in actual effort. Usually, I think in first year, especially, most of us register, then we submit something for the sake of submitting, right? That is what everyone does till they get serious about it. So this was our first serious case comp, and it didn't work out. And of course, you don't get feedback from the judges. So it is kind of like an open-ended rejection, right? So we wanted to really see what went wrong. And that's why we went through the decks of our classmates who were actually selected for the further rounds. So I think that also really helps because you can clearly see that, okay, we haven't incorporated this, we didn't think of this, and you can take this learning forward in your next case comp. So I think it will come with practice, is the sad truth.
I think basically it is a journey that you'll go through in your first and second year, and at times it is also about your seriousness that you rightly pointed out. Whether you're interested in it or not, if you're interested, you will put in extra efforts. You will try to figure out. Okay, there are some seniors who have cracked the case comp, so let's go ask them, see their decks. But at the end of the day, personally saying, I felt that even after going through their decks, I would have a different thought process towards presenting a specific idea and presenting a specific solution. So maybe their deck would help me to understand, okay, what are the required elements into the presentation. But at the end of the day, my structure would more or less depend on how I think and how I view those things and what I want to showcase during the final presentation, which again, you guys have also kind of emphasized on, wherein your thought processes at specific points of time were different. So, all in all, guys, it is your own journey. People will come in, pitch in a bit, but at the end of the day, you will have to do majority of the work. You cannot just see a presentation and say, "Okay, okay, I'll copy this, and maybe I'll be there in the national finale or semi-finale." That is not the case. Okay, moving on to the third question. Akash Tiwari is asking, I want to understand how do you guys deep dive and research for the cases, as each sectors are different and then each company is altogether very different. So the brand ideology will be different of the company, the group, and again the sectors are different. So how do you align those things with your own thought process?
Right. So I think in terms of research, what really helps, the first step should be a simple Google research, right? And not referring to any random sources, but actually reports. Let's say all these firms, right, like Big Four or Big Three consulting firms, or firms that specifically cater to a particular type of industry, regularly put out a lot of reports on the internet, which are public for everyone to see. So I think when you're going through something, if you find a very good report, let's say about generative AI in our case, then what you should do is go through the entire report, and that will help you get an understanding of the industry, the company in the industry that you're doing the case comp for, right? And abhi to you guys have chat gpt, so you can just put the report and get a quick summary, right? If you think I can't read hundreds of reports myself, so that is also something you can do initially. Second thing is, I think there are some proprietary resources, right? So every college, usually in MBA, has some access that they'll give you, let's say to Statista or to something or the other, where a lot of reports are available. So these are not publicly available, and these are usually more thorough in terms of their coverage. So you can refer to these reports. And I think after that, on the company, it depends really. If it's an FMCG or some company whose TG is all around you, of course you should do primary research, right? That is actually one thing I wanted to call out. We actually didn't do primary research here because TVS's customers are usually rural, most of them, and based like we're new to credit essentially. So we can of course float a Google form and get some responses, but it really won't be relevant. But if it is relevant, definitely primary research, because that is nowhere on the internet, and it's like some value that you are adding to the judges, right? So I think these three things, and then connecting them with your own understanding, concepts, and what you know about the company should be the way to go. Athar, if you want to add something.
Right. And in terms of the benchmarking, which we had done in this particular case, like in order to do that, firstly, you have to be company agnostic. So basically, just look at industry reports for that particular sector. So NBFC sector in this case, then identify 5 to 6 companies from the particular sector, then go to an industry or a sector which is somewhat closely related to the NBFC sector, which was the credit financing sector. Then take 2 or 3 companies from that particular sector and do benchmarking for those companies. And from all these things, you will get 5 to 6 different parameters that you would want to yourself work on. And that is how basically benchmarking across different companies should be done. And I think that is also something which we actively followed in this particular case.
Just a quick question on this because guys, the viewers might not be uh, asking this to you. How many hours you spent on this particular case course?
I think I should answer this. So, me and Anuja work have a very different work style. So, if I had to make 3 slides, I would just sit at a stretch for 12 hours and get it done. But she works in a very different sense, so that she will sit for 2 hours for 6 days and then get it done. So basically, being comfortable with each other's work styles, and that is something which is very important when you are making teams. And so in terms of the time which we spent on the case com, so in my case it was just 1 day while making the deck, and let's say considering the research and everything, probably 3 extra days on top of that. But in Anuja's case it was probably 10 days. So it is very relative. As long as you get the work done before the deadline, that is what matters. So the time you
So
spent is not
yeah, if you're
significant.
trying to define it in hours, how many hours you will say that you have individually spent and Anuja has individually spent? Just to give viewers an understanding, because if you look at the questions are more on the superficial side, wherein they're just trying to understand how the presentation is made or how the research is done. But actually, when you go through the journey, you'll realize maybe that I have done 60 hours of research with my team, for example, just to arrive at a very basic idea and a very basic understanding of how the company is working. And maybe then 20 more hours to create a presentation or create a, let's say, 6 slider or a 7 slider deck. Whether it is a 2 slider, then maybe 5, 6 hours, right? So I think this understanding is also very relevant for them, because then they realize, okay, this many hours of work a particular team put in, and then they reach the national finals. And again, if everything goes well, then they'll become a winner or runners up, right? So I think giving that context is also very important.
Yeah, so I think the first submission that you saw, the two-pager, right? Like Athar was saying, so I would have worked, I think, 4 hours for around 4 days. Because that was the first submission, right? We had no base, no understanding, absolutely no idea. So research, just getting myself familiarized with how it works, took a long time. Athar also, I think, would have put in similar hours, but or shorter time frame. So yeah, I think around 12 hours, 12 to 20 hours you can pick.
Okay.
And finals may we had a good base in terms of how we want to go about things. And we also wanted to pick things from our first submission, like the customer journey that we thought the judges like. So we had a good outline, but we really had to deep dive and research on a lot of things. So, for example, the credit risk bit that Athar was talking about, he read actual research papers, like which were pretty long to arrive at how the algorithm works, right? Because that's not something that we understand by default. So I think honestly, it's hard to define in terms of number of hours because a lot of case comps were going on at that point. It's like a peak case comp season. But I think, yeah, it would have been around 4 hours for around 5 to 6 days again for the finals.
And like
So is it?
based
Yeah,
on
yeah, go
our
ahead.
experience, it is generally harder to make the executive summary, because the point
Yes.
of an executive summary is to have breadth in it. So you have to decide if this is relevant, that is not relevant. Should I leave this one, or should I include this in my deck? So that is, I think, harder. And for the final presentations, it is quite easier because you are just focusing on 3 to 4 things, and you have already decided that these 3 to 4 things are important. So while the research for the final submission is harder, it is less tedious, I would say, compared to making an executive summary.
Okay. Just a quick question. So, did your idea evolve during the rounds when, let's say, in the executive summary round, maybe you had a basic understanding of how things would work, and in your finals, maybe you might have added a couple of details into it. So, was your idea in the initial stages finalized, or you finalized it during the process?
Yeah, so I think in this particular problem statement, right, there was no central idea as such, or like one big idea around which our presentation will revolve. It was more of a core strategy thing wherein they want something done. They're asking us how to do it, right? So I think it did evolve in terms of, if you see in the first couple of slides, we have talked about a lot of use cases, right? And then we didn't really actually prioritize as we've done in the finals. We picked four use cases that we thought were relevant. And of course, it's a two-pager, so you can't really deep dive into your rationale and why you are picking these four, etc. But in the finals, we focused on the implementation, which was a very good thing, I feel. We also focused on bringing everything together in the first and the last slide as to how it's working. We focused on the impact. So I think that idea was more hashed out in the final solution, and maybe a couple of things were reprioritized. But overall, since this wasn't a case form that revolves around idea, um, it wasn't that different, I think.
Okay, moving on to the next question. When you're terming an initiative to be viable or impactful, what is the background thought process behind it? Based on what parameters or research can we claim such? I think you have already explained this part in the presentation, but you can maybe quickly summarize it if you're willing to.
Right. So quantifying the viability as well as the feasibility for anything, and each parameter it would have a different process. So I'll take two very different things which we have included in our PPT. So the first thing would be the credit risk assessment system. So we obviously do not have access to the CRM system which TVS Credit currently uses. We only have access to industry-wide research papers and white papers. So that is the thing which we decided as a parameter to base our conclusion of it being feasible or viable. And in terms of actually determining whether it is actually viable or not, in this particular case, if let's say algorithms are already being employed by companies to find out the number of people that are going to potentially default in the next 6 months, and we just decide to use another some sort of an AI algorithm on top of it, then the implementation of such a thing is easy because the system for that already exists in the industry. So that is something which is viable for the company and also a value add. So that is one thing where in which you can actually quantify the impact or the feasibility of whatever thing. And on the other side, let me take an example of the customer service bots. So they already exist even in TVS Credit, and it is quite easy for us as external users to actually know how efficient they are at getting the tasks done. So if we are suggesting that instead of just having a chatbot, make it a generative AI based chatbot, then it is quite obvious that it would obviously work better than the current chatbot, and also the implementation of that is quite easy, and hence the determination of feasibility and impact in this case is quite easy, and it would be high in both the cases. So that is basically how you should ideally approach this. So like based on my analysis it could be a high impact thing, but based on someone else's analysis that same thing could be like a moderate impact thing. So it is obviously very relative to each and every submission.
Yeah, and just to add one line is when you're analyzing something, you don't really have to put pressure on yourself that, I need a source that says this thing is low impact. Then only I can say low impact. Because there's a reason we've put high, medium, and low, right? It's again not that specific. So as long as you have a rationale in your mind, like Atharva explained his rationale, it should be fine because a judge will just ask you, why is this low impact? And you just have to give three bullet points that I considered these three factors, which is why I believe it is low impact. Because हर चीज का हमें source नहीं मिलेगा. Otherwise, it's just a simple collation exercise, right? So of course, a lot of things you will pick from reports, etc. But a lot of things you will add based on what you understand, and that's okay. You shouldn't hesitate before doing that.
So at the end of the day, basically, it is your understanding. Things would be subjective, and judges will have to deal with it. There's no other way out. Uh, Basically, you take your call and be hopeful that you are able to justify based on whatever questions are being asked. And if you have done your research, I think that won't be a major issue. Okay. Ananya Maheshwari is asking, "Hi, do you guys have a time frame for each page?" I think we have already discussed, but if you want to go ahead and maybe talk about it in a sentence or so.
So,
Time frame for each slide, she means.
Huh. Each page,
so
each slide.
Okay, go ahead. Akhil.
no, we don't have a time frame for each slide. Our aim is just to finish that slide end to end in a way that we both are happy with it around 6 hours before the submission deadline. So that is the time frame which we use.
So the timeline is with respect to the deadline and not with respect to the slide or page.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Animesh,
sometimes it used to. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, so sometimes why we're laughing is sometimes it used to happen that, I feel, let's say a slide is done, but let's say Athar will say, no, this is not the right way, or vice versa, right? And we used to sit and have a lot of discussion, sometimes arguments also around this. But the rule of thumb we followed is we won't say a slide is done until both of us are reasonably satisfied. So if Athar has made a slide and I have some issues with it, then he has to convince me before we can go ahead, and vice versa. So I think you should have that dynamic with your team so that when you go in front of the judges, right, you should be a truly a team. Both of you should be on board with every single word that you have mentioned in your PPT. वहां जाके ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि ये इसने किया है, ये मैंने किया है. So I don't agree with what he has put on the slide. So I think that is very, very important.
I think a very critical point highlighted by Anuja was we have seen a couple of national finals wherein people have actually done this. That sir, I have not made this slide. This X person has made this slide, so I think they will take you through. And then there's a whole mashup with respect to the ideas. One will say X, second will say Y, and then it kind of messes up your chances of, let's say, winning. So it is very critical that you are not, uh, let's say, speaking as an individual, but as a team when you're presenting your ideas. And the process that you followed, I think, more or less, majority of the teams would follow, wherein they'll try to make sure that this is the final product that as a team we want to go ahead with. And if you're satisfied with that, then eventually things turn out positive for you. Okay, great. Animesh Jaiswal is asking, how did you prepare for the quiz round? Are there any sources you can share?
So I don't think we really prepared. It was more about us going through our PPT and showing it to some friends that, what do you think, what questions are coming to your mind when you are going through this deck, right? So that was one thing that helped us just have an idea of what questions might come our way and maybe have a thought in mind so that we don't hesitate when asking. And honestly, I feel that if you've really done your research and put in the hours, you don't need to worry about Q&A because every word, if you put in your PPT with a rationale, you just have to recall and convey that rationale to the judges. So I think if you've thoroughly gone through everything, it you shouldn't really be nervous about that, but it can help to do a dry run with your friends, definitely.
I think Anuja by quiz round they meant the first round which we usually have before the case
Oh,
comms, the
oh,
MCQs.
I'm really sorry, really sorry. Yeah,
No,
maybe
no
I thought
issues.
you can talk about that.
No, so basically the way you prepare for the quiz round is you don't prepare for it at all because it will always be very random, especially if it is on unstock.com. So just have your mobile phones ready and make sure that they aren't visible in your camera view, and just make sure that you answer as fast as possible. So there is no way you can prepare for the quiz rounds.
I think my views are also same on this. Like, there's no way to prepare. Just think about it that you'll be able to sail through, and then think about what would be the problem statement that will be thrown in front of you. Okay. Tejasvi is asking, as you know, a lot of people might come up with the similar solution. Uh, if we talk about feasibility, how do you stand out from the competitors?
I think we've already answered this in parts in terms of, A is your structure, the way you're presenting your idea. Especially, see, if it's something related to marketing, then the idea itself would be very different, right? So that sets you apart. But in a case comp like this, which is more on the strategy side, wherein, मतलब, सबको पता है कि generative AI, if you want to put, then the top five use cases, honestly, everybody knows. It's not a secret, right? It's not something that we've thought of by ourselves. But the way you are presenting it, the entire presentation should be tight, should be connected, should flow seamlessly. There should be a rationale in the PPT itself for everything, right? It shouldn't be too text heavy, like Athar was mentioning earlier. You should try to use frameworks wherever you can. Again, that doesn't mean force fitting a framework, but just keeping it structured, just asking yourself if it makes sense to put a framework here rather than simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think that helps you stand out. And yeah, I mean, that's what I think helped us stand out.
Okay. Uh, I think the another question is already being answered in parts by Atharva and Anuja, which is how did you quantify the impact? So quantifying the impact again, it would depend on the parameters that you are considering, and it would be slightly subjective. Again, as a team, you would have to take that call. What exactly are you uh, proposing in your solution? Akash Tiwari is asking, let's say, given 15 days, how do you divide things between yourself, not everyone doing same thing? You want to take it up? I think more or less you've talked about it already. So,
Yeah.
okay. Let's skip this. Animesh Jaiswal again asking, how did you do the scenario analysis? What was the approach? Anything specific, Atharva or Anuja, you want to highlight here with respect to scenarios analysis?
So, apart from the things which I said earlier, just one thing you need to keep in mind is that there will be a lot of assumptions which you will be making when you are actually doing the scenario analysis. So, like you or your teammates should constantly be doing some sort of a sense check. Ki this number does this number actually feel right, or is it way too off than what the ideal scenario should be? For example, TVS Limited's current profit might be X, but based on my scenario analysis, if it is showing me that they will have 10x profit as soon as the GenAI it is obviously extremely absurd. So that is one thing which you should be keeping in mind so that it just makes sense in real life. So that is just one thing which you need to consider in a scenario analysis. And of course, I won't get into the method of doing the scenario analysis because you will be able to find it anywhere on YouTube. So, but that is one thing which you should consider.
Uh, Another question is, how do you guys divide work amongst yourself? Matlab, is there any approach that you follow?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's important to first, when you finalize the structure of the PPT, right? How your entire presentation will flow. That you should sit together and do definitely, because that's something that requires a constant back and forth discussion, and you have to come up with it together as a team. After that, I think based on your interests, based on some things knowledge you might already have, like for example, here we till we identified the four use cases, we were sitting together and doing the work. But after the use cases were identified, it was very apt for most of the things. I was like, okay, personalization I'll take. Athar was like, I'll take this. So I think it also helps to have a little bit of a different skill set, so that your skill set and interests are complementing each other, such that there is no friction or hassle about what one wants to take. And sometimes, if there was a hassle, then I think you just mutually decide. That's why, as Athar was mentioning, your team is really important. It should be someone who, first of all, you trust, and they also can trust you and your knowledge, so that when there's a friction, you actually make a point to respect both opinions and arrive at a middle ground. Um, and of course, if you have a complementary skill set, like let's say Atharv specialization was finance, strategy and finance. Mine was strategy and marketing. So that also shows the bent of mind and the interest that we have, which really helped us divide. Like, of course, I would never make the financial slide. That was agreed upon by both of us. So yeah, I mean, that's how you can divide.
So I think the key takeaway would be complementary skill sets. And again, there will be overlaps, but at the same point of time, there would be certain highlights with respect to an individual skill set, which the individual is going to take up. I think at the end of the day, it also depends on what CaseCom demands. Accordingly, you will break it up amongst yourselves or amongst your teammates. So, really, no fixed answer for this. I think you would experience it once you start participating in the CaseComs. Cool. Was the national finale online or offline?
It was
That was
virtual.
online.
It was online. Okay. Again, guys, it is not fixed. It might just become offline next year. So don't take it like something which is very fixed. It would become volatile depending on the case com and depending on the year, right? Last question is any rough idea of the CTC offered when you get a PPO at TVS crediting pick,
Uh, Not
or
really.
if you
I
want to
think,
give a range?
yeah. Atharv, I think we
Both
were
of us.
told about a PPI over mail, but none of us availed it.
Hmm.
So we're not really sure. Maybe we can
I think it
find out
was
when
around. No, no.
you
Yeah, I mean, both
if
of
you
us didn't.
remember, you can go ahead.
Both
Yeah.
of us didn't accept the PPO, so we don't know the exact figure. But like we talked to a few people, and I think it was somewhere around 24 or something, as far as I know.
Okay. I think with that question, our Q&A session is also done. So I'd like to thank the team who came forward and shared their ideas, talked about the whole process of TVS Credit Epic Season 5 and how they emerged as the national winners of the same. I'll also like to thank all the viewers who came forward, posted their questions, and at the same point of time, made sure that we have a very healthy discussion with respect to this presentation. So with this, we'll like to close the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Akhilesh.
Thank you.